Well, welcome back to our online class, Heart of a Follower. We don't have very many sessions left, so I would encourage you to keep studying and keep pushing into the Word of God because I know He has more in store for you. So let's go ahead and grab our Bibles, and we're just going to dive into our study of Heart of a Follower. So most people have a sport that they enjoy watching, and for some of you, maybe you enjoy college basketball, or some of you enjoy watching the NFL, but one that I have always enjoyed watching is women's gymnastics. And it's always just amazed me at the ability that they have to do all these different stunts and tricks, and just the strength that it takes probably to do a lot of what they do. And you've probably heard of an American gymnast by the name of Simone Biles, and she's kind of just taken the gymnastics world by storm over the last couple years, and in preparation for the 2020 Olympics, she's done some new tricks, and she now has 4 signature moves named after her. And I'm going to show you a clip of one of those signature moves. This is called, I believe it's the Biles 2. It's a on the floor exercise, and what she does is a triple double on the floor, and that consists of a double backflip with 3 twists. And it's absolutely amazing that here's this girl at 4'8", and she just flies through the air, twisting and backflipping, and again, it's just amazing. But part of her success has come because she's had a willing spirit. She's been willing to put years and years and years of training into it. She's been willing to try new things that no one else in the gymnastics world is doing. But she's also been willing to stretch and push past probably what she or even her coach thought she was capable of years ago. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is having a willing spirit. Because if we truly want to have the heart of a follower, it's going to require us continually be willing to do what God has asked us to do. And sometimes that means being willing to step out of our comfort zone, being willing to try new things, being willing to be obedient when it doesn't make sense. But we're going to look at a great example in the book of Joshua. And so if you want to go ahead and turn over to Joshua chapter 3, we're going to look at this guy who has come up into leadership after Moses, and he's leading the people into a new season. And we're going to see just kind of how he had to be willing to do a lot of different things just in this little chapter. So starting in verse 1, it says, "Early in the morning, Joshua and all the Israelites set out and went to the Jordan, where they camped before crossing over. And after 3 days, the officers went throughout the camp, giving orders to the people. When you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God and the priests who are Levites carrying it, you are to move out from your positions and follow it. Then you will know which way to go, since you have never been this way before. But keep a distance of about 1,000 yards between you and the ark, and do not go near it." Verse 5. Joshua told the people, "Consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you." And Joshua said to the priests, "Take up the ark of the covenant and pass on ahead of the people." So they took it up and went ahead of them. And the Lord said to Joshua, "Today I will begin to exalt you in the eyes of all Israel, so that they may know that I am with you as I was with Moses. And tell the priests who are carrying the ark of the covenant, when you reach the edge of the Jordan's waters, go and stand in the river." And so Joshua said to the Israelites, "Come here and listen to the words of the Lord." He gathered them all together. In verse 10, "This is how you will know that the living God is among you, and that he will certainly drive out before you all of these people that are against you." Verse 11, "See, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth will go into the Jordan ahead of you. Now then, choose 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one from each tribe, and as soon as the priests who carry the ark of the Lord of all the earth, set foot in the Jordan, its waters flowing downstream will be cut off and stand up in a heap." Verse 14, "So when the people broke out from camp to cross the Jordan. The priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant went ahead of them, and now the Jordan is at flood stage all during harvest. Yet as soon as the priests who carried the ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream stopped flowing it, and it piled up in a heap in a great distance away at a town called Adam. And this is such a cool story because here they are stepping into a new season and they just truly see the Lord do something miraculous. And there's 3 different things that we're going to look at that they had to be willing to do. The first one is they had to be willing to go. They had to be willing to go. And if you're like our family, whenever we're planning a vacation or planning a trip, we always map out the way that we're going to get there. We look at what interstates we want to take. We try to see if there's any construction along the way that would kind of hinder us or hinder our time. And sometimes, we map it out, but then we have to use Google Maps to kind of get us through things that maybe we didn't foresee. But God had called Joshua and the Israelites to go to the Jordan and to cross it, but up until this point, he's not told them how they're going to cross it. And so it was taking a step of faith to say, okay, God, we're willing to go to the Jordan, now what? And I love how Matthew Henry kind of puts it. He says, we must go in the way of our duty, though we foresee difficulties, trusting God to help us through them when we come to them. Let us proceed as far as we can and then depend on divine sufficiency for which we find ourselves not sufficient for. And I can see that's probably where Joshua is at, because again, here he is stepping into leadership after Moses, this great and mighty man of God. Moses being the one that was with God when he wrote the 10 Commandments on the tablet. Moses was the one that saw God just protect them through all of the plagues and help them get out of Egypt. And here Joshua is stepping up to the plate and leading all of these millions of people, but he's not sure what God's going to do to get them to cross. And I'm sure that he said, okay, we'll go as far as we can and we'll trust God with the rest. But we have to be willing to go, even when we don't have all of the details. It's just like the disciples. Whenever Jesus says, come follow me, they didn't have all of the details, but we see that they dropped their nets and they were willing to go. There's other examples all throughout the Bible of how people were willing to just drop whatever and be willing to follow what the Lord is saying to them. But the key is that we can't get stuck on the things that we don't see. Sometimes, again, we don't get all of the details of what the journey is going to be like. Sometimes we don't get all of the how it's going to unfold. But if the Lord's called you to it, he'll lead you through it. If the Lord calls you to cross the Jordan, he'll make a way for you to get through the Jordan. And it's no different in your life today. Whatever he's called you to, he'll lead you through, but you have to be willing to go. The second thing is we have to be willing to move positions. Using sports again kind of as an example. If the quarterback is looking for someone to throw the ball to, he's going to look for the running back, right? Or whoever is open. And for that person to remain open, they're going to have to move throughout the field and make sure that their opponent is not hindering that quarterback from getting them the ball. Or if you look at a relay team is not going to do very well if someone's not willing to run the baton to the next person. And I'm sure that Michael Phelps would not have as many medals if he was just waiting in one end of the pool. We have to be willing to move positions to do what God has called us to do. And in verse 3, the officers of the Israelites, they go throughout the camp and they talk about how when the Ark of the Covenant, talking about this thing that represented the presence of God, is moving in front of you, you need to move from your position and get behind it and follow it. Because you're going to be going to a place that you've never been before. And that's how the Lord's going to lead you through, is by you following the Ark of the Covenant. And sometimes God will call us to move positions. And that might look like moving into a new ministry team. Maybe that's moving into a leadership position, whether that's at your job or again here at church or whatever it is. Or maybe he's wanting you to move positions from something that you've held on to, and he's wanting you to relinquish that and give it over to him. You have to be willing to move your position and say, okay, God, I'm releasing this over to you. And again, the disciples released their nets and chose to go follow him. They had to move from their position of fishermen and then go into, okay, God is going to make us into fishers of men. David had to go from a shepherd boy to being exalted as king of Israel. Paul had to move from the position of persecuting the church to the one building the church. And whatever it is that God has called you to move into, he'll help you make those adjustments, because sometimes moving into a leadership position is a lot of stretching. It's a learning curve for you. Or if you're moving into a ministry team, it's going to be learning the ropes of how everything's done. Or if you're moving into a new position in your job that you feel like the Lord has just opened the door, it may take some getting used to with working with new coworkers. But whatever it is that he's brought you to, he'll help you make those adjustments. He'll work it all out. And I'm sure that he'll teach you things through it along the way. But just like in Romans chapter 8, it says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him and have been called according to his purpose." So if God has called you to move positions, he'll bring good out of it. If God has called you to take a step of faith and do something new, he'll teach you something through it, but you have to be willing to move. The last one is be willing to do what doesn't make sense. So if we put ourselves in Joshua's shoes for just a moment, I want you to think about what it would have been like to step into that leadership role after Moses. I'm sure that there was a lot of maybe questions that he had of how everything was going to work out, and just thinking about filling these big shoes. And here he is with not only having a small group of people, but we know that there were quite a number of Israelites that he would have been in charge of. And God had called him into that leadership role, and now he's telling him, okay, you're going to lead the people to the Jordan and you're going to cross over. But yet again, he doesn't have how it's going to happen. And not only did God call him to cross the Jordan, but he did it during flood season. And after they get to the Jordan, God says, okay, I want you to put the priests out into the water. So again, he's asking him, okay, I want you to take these people who are carrying the Ark of the Covenant and go into the floodwaters. Now, if you're just sitting there and thinking through that, that really doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because with the floods, that can make the river stronger, the current stronger. It could make, where they were trying to get in a little bit more complicated. It didn't really make sense in our minds. But here he is, God saying, okay, I want you to do this, and then I'm going to do the miraculous to show these people that I'm with you just like I was with Moses. And as they were faithful and willing to step out into what didn't make sense, God took the water and just completely moved it out of the way. And we need to remember that we serve the God that took dirt and spit, made mud, wiped it on a man's eyes, and healed him of his blindness. We're talking about the God that spoke through a donkey. We're talking about the God that walked on water. We're talking about the God that had a guy build an ark for a flood when there had never been rain on the earth before. We're talking about a God that used a 16-year-old kid to take a slingshot and a stone and take down a giant. We're talking about a God that used his own son to die to give us life. And whatever God has called you to, if it doesn't make sense, be willing to step out in faith and say, okay, God, whatever you're asking me to do, I'm going to do it. Because it's just like when Peter got out of the boat and began walking on water. That didn't make sense. But he learned that Jesus would always be there to reach out to him. He learned that if you have great faith and keep your eyes focused on the Lord, you can do things that you didn't think were possible. So be willing to do the things that don't make sense. But I hope that you're encouraged that no matter what God is asking you to do, if you're willing to do it, you're going to see God move in your life. And I don't know what God may be asking you to do, but if God encourages you to reach out to that person at work, be willing to do it because someone was willing to tell you about Jesus. Whether that's being willing to get up in the morning and spend an hour in prayer, be willing to do that because just like the disciples in the garden, could you not pray for 1 hour? Be willing to do it. And if you feel stirred to get involved and try a new ministry, then step out in faith and try it because we've been called to serve. We've been called to be the hands and feet of Jesus. So again, no matter what it is, be willing to do it. But we're so glad, again, that you're a part of this study. Join us next week for our final session of Heart of a Follower. But we love you, we're praying for you, and we hope you have a great week. We'll see you then.